Baldur's Gate 3 is absolutely smashing it, breaking records, and I'm sure there's some people who are enjoying the game that are, normal, well-educated, regular folk. But that is not what Twitter is leading me to believe. So welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and we're going to talk about how so many individuals are so thirsty over this game, and their Twitter posts are making it very apparent that they have never had sex to the point where if they wanted to travel, the only airline that would sell them a ticket would be Virgin Airlines. First, we're going to cover how the media is handling this game. This is from the Mary Sue. Baldur's Gate 3 is putting me in a bisexual headlock, and I do not appreciate it. Have I earned my mega nerd card yet? First of all, what's a nerd card? What's your mega nerd card got to do with your sexuality? I've known plenty of nerds in my life. Gay, straight, lesbian, whatever. And not one of their nerd cred was tied to who they did or didn't want to sleep with. Like, that makes no sense in the context here. But it's not just the Mary Sue. You expect this sort of thing from the Mary Sue. What about, DazedDigital.com? Baldur's Gate 3, the queerest video game of all time? It's based off Dungeons and Dragons, guys. Now, first of all, this has been something I've been complaining about for Dungeons and Dragons for a long time now. Wizards of the Coast will just not stop catering to these weird individuals that just want to fetishize absolutely everything, inject their own fetishes into everything. Like, don't get me wrong, we all know there's individuals out there that want to, roll an at 20 and seduce the barmaid or whatever. Obviously, you have gay people, straight people, whatever, all playing D&D. But at the end of the day, it is about so much more than just your sexual orientation. You're going to go out there, you're going to fight dragons, you're going to liberate entire townsfolk from bands of goblins or barbarians or your raiders. You're gonna go out and you want to roleplay. You might go to some sort of Chultan weapons expo and then find some super cool silver sword. There's so much about Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games in general that make the act of role-playing very impressive. Can you talk your way out of a certain situation instead of running in guns a-blazing? If you get caught doing something you probably shouldn't be doing, are you able to sort of disguise or lie your way out of it? There's so many avenues for role-playing, and from what I've heard, this game does a fantastic job in the roleplay element, but for some reason, all anyone wants to do is talk about the sexual nature of it. What about this one right here? This is from rockpapershotgun.com. Baldur's Gate 3 is a relentlessly horny game. Why? Why do we need all these articles talking about how horny the game is? Now, I'll be honest, I am so turned off to the idea of playing this game because it just screams the modern 5th edition fanbase. And for people that have no knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons, don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, I can see them having a good time with this game for the roleplay aspect. My good friend, Classic Cage, she knows nothing about D&D, nothing about Wizards of the Coast, and she is very much enjoying this game purely for its in-depth roleplay. And guess what? So far as I can tell, so far as she's told me, she ain't done nothing sexual in it, because that is not all the game is about. But you would not know that that's not all the game is about when it comes to these sorts of articles, when it comes to these sorts of morons on Twitter. Now let's move on over to Twitter. Right here, this is from Danny Cougar. In Baldur's Gate 3, you can get a blowjob as a gnome from a drow. Best game ever. And yeah, here it is. YouTube ain't gonna like the fact that I'm showing it, but whatever, it is what it is. And then we got Mugen Lord, by the way, great YouTube channel. Go ahead, subscribe to him. He put out some banger videos. He says, it's crazy how everyone is fine with bear sex and all kinds of kinks in Baldur's Gate 3. All I hear about is the sex in the game and not the game itself. But when you just want to have attractive looking females in a video game, all of a sudden you're an incel. Mugen Lord is exactly correct. First of all, that's all I'm hearing about is the sex in this game. And while I'm sure there's far more to it than that, frankly, Classic Cage, again, she's been very much enjoying it, telling me some other details. Turns out there is more to this game than just getting boned and fighting monsters, but you wouldn't know about it from the way the internet and Twitter and all these, games journalists are talking about the game, are treating the game. And then he has another great point. When you just want attractive-looking females in a video game, all of a sudden you're an incel. What? People complaining about the look of Ashley in Resident Evil 4 Remake? Well, these toxic man babies have no idea what it's like to be a true woman, and we need more feminism in Resident Evil 4. All these incels that never had sex, complaining that they're ruining the game. Or what about Cammy in Street Fighter 6? Oh, her original outfit's back, and it's just because of the toxic misogynists out there who want to see barely clothed women in a fighting game. You guys are out here throwing a fit that men want to look at, and frankly, people in general, not just men, that people in general want to look at good-looking individuals while playing some sort of fiction with no sort of sexual connotation to it. It's a fighting game, it's a horror game, but oh well, they're a little scantily clad or showing some skin or whatnot. But here, you got full-on homo nudity or even straight nudity, because I'm sure you can have this cutscene, whether you're gay, straight, whatever, but you've got full-on sex scenes, and you're getting on to us for just wanting the Japanese video game character girls to be sexy sexy, or even the Western ones. Like, yeah, sure, you make Aloy from the Horizon games a frumpy dumpster fire of a human being, but then you get on to us for being like, hey, this seems like a little much. We don't want ugly characters. Frankly, these character models aren't exactly ugly, but that doesn't mean we constantly want the sexual acts shown and shoved in our face. But it's not just Mugen Lord. We got Vera Dark here. Baldur's Gate 3 is stunning and brave for featuring full sex scenes and nudity because it's comedic. But the same site has claimed that sex was treated too much like a joke in GTA, and SR3's depiction of sex work was dated and ugly because it was treated as a joke. These people are clowns. So here we of course have, this is from Games Radar, I believe, or The Gamer, whichever. Baldur's Gate 3 isn't ashamed of nudity, it actively embraces it. They also made articles. Rockstar needs to grow up about sex. No, Rockstar doesn't need to be censored, but they continue to focus on moving stories like that out of Red Dead Redemption 2. It makes less sense to have a sex joke. And then they've got Saints Row III's depiction of sex work is dated and ugly. One part of the game has aged about as well as Milk in the Open Sun, its depiction of sex work. So here they go. But now they're talking about how this game isn't ashamed of nudity, it actively celebrates it. I mean, you're sitting here, you're contradicting yourself. Then we got Della here. Della says everything Sophia Narwit says about games journalists is true. These people need to be replaced by AI if you ask me. And we got two articles from PC Gamer. One, Baldur's Gate 3 is thirsty as hell and I couldn't be happier. And then we got this one, Baldur's Gate 3 is weirdly horny and I'm shy. What is up with the fixation on the sexual aspects of this game? Like it's just weird. I remember, well I shouldn't say I remember, I wasn't alive in the 80s, but I've heard plenty of horror stories about the satanic panic of the 80s. People were being accused like, oh, you're a Dungeons and Dragons player? You're a Satanist. D&D was being banned in schools. People were telling you were going to hell. If you were caught playing D&D, you get in trouble with your parents or whatnot. When D&D has always been a game about just role-playing, pretending you are an adventurer, and living out that adventure. And yes, obviously, like I was saying earlier, now and again, you're gonna find yourself, in a bar, and there's gonna be a sexy barmaid. You might want to role-play, falling in love with her, or trying to court her, or just going so much as like one-night stand and whatnot. That's obviously a part of role-playing. You're putting yourself in a character's shoes, and you want to live out the fantasy as that other character. But that's never been the entire experience of any tabletop RPG, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons or otherwise, and yet that is all these individuals seem to be focused on. What is up with the fetishization, just the over-sexualization of this game, of this medium, whether it be a tabletop RPG, whether it be, a video game RPG like we're seeing here? I mean, what would happen if you were trying this in LARPing, live action role-playing? That is going to be some grounds for lawsuits when you start getting this sexual. It is just mind-blowing to me that people are celebrating this game that is not, I mean, sure, it's probably an amazing game under the surface, or under all this, I should say. It probably really is. I've heard some incredible things about what it's able to do in terms of the roleplay aspect. But when this is all you're showing the regular normie crowd, I'm sorry, as someone who's been playing tabletop RPGs for a long time now, this is not representative of what these types of games normally are. We got Boy here, and Boy says Baldur's Gate 3 is getting attention for nudity debates despite being one of the most successful examples of an RPG that wasn't watered down to please the COD audience is one of the reasons we can't have nice things. And I'm sure he is correct. I'm sure that this is an amazing game under the surface. For that same reason, it was not watered down for the COD audience. It actually gives you full exploration, full role-playing, fantastic combat, but of course, everyone only wants to talk about the nudity, and that is what's getting the eyes on this game. We got plenty of good comments. It's weird. It's like the character designer was made for the articles. You can't change the height, size, or any facial features. You can make a dick girl elf with vitiligo, or whatever that is. Like, yeah, I haven't played the game, but if this is true, you can't change the height, size, or any facial features of the kid. Like, man, in Fallout 4, which is like almost a decade old at this point, I can make my character look almost exactly like Bruce Campbell with full-on facial feature animations, the whole nine. You're telling me you can't change the size of your character? I thought you were all about representation. What if some pudgy fat bitch wants to play, but she can't make her character fat? Oh man, not representing you, are they? Now, thankfully, I'm pretty A-okay with that. We all know that fat people are cancer. Jokes aside, like, yeah, seriously, this is not good character creation. This here, it's because features like size or face structures would require the alteration of different features like armor sets or animations. Giving someone a different skin JPEG is easy, and sure, if you make yourself, a whale of a character model, then maybe that would change the armor, but even still, you don't want to go on and tout about how amazing the character creation is, which people are talking all the time. Oh, the character creation is so in-depth. Is it really though? Like okay, so you can choose whether or not you want your female character to have a dick and a male or female voice and be non-binary, but is that really just the pinnacle of character creation? Thor Thunderdog here says, because it's just kind of weird how they did it. Fire up the game for the first time, and the very first thing you have to do is choose whether or not to have nudity. So, I mean, that's kind of, I don't know if that's a red flag per se. Nudity in a game, I'm not a prude, guys. I don't traditionally care if there's, you know, a bunch of sex or nudity in a video game or in any artistic art form. If you want to watch, you know, an anime or a movie or whatever that's got nudity, sex scenes, whatnot, dude, I loved Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer had some pretty graphic sex scenes. I mean, granted for only about 30 seconds, but still had pretty graphic sex scenes. But at the end of the day, if that's what you want to watch, if that's the sort of art you want to consume, I'm all for it. Your boy ain't no prude. But it is weird that that's the very first thing you're presented with when you boot up a game, and it makes it doubly weird when that's all these outlets are focusing on. Like, why is it that people are talking about the sexuality and the sexual nature of the characters in this game and what you can do in this game, instead of, I'm sure, some really awesome other things you can do in the game? It's bananas to me. You're presented with more options for your character's genitals than face presets. It's like there was a lot of focus on something that's probably going to be largely irrelevant. And then you've got individuals like Illy here. Illy hiatus but ranting about Baldur's Gate 3. I'm modifying my PSA. Baldur's Gate 3 allows poly relationships if it suits the interested parties and the person you're dating likes the person who wants to make a throuple. I'm screaming, frothing, completely feral and unhinged. Yeah, we could tell just by your opening statement you were completely feral and unhinged. She has 2 boyfriends now, or he, I don't know, does it really matter? They, them, whatever, has 2 boyfriends now. Game of the year, the game of the year because they can have multiple boyfriends. That is psychotic. Like, I know this is it is a good game. It is not doing the numbers it is on Steam because it's a bad game. It's not like these freaks are the majority. No, these are obviously a very loud minority, so it's gotta be having some sort of mass appeal to have the Steam numbers it has. But when this is what is being represented to the masses because you have people screaming at the top of their lungs about being able to be in a virtual throuple, is that not sort of like an icon for the degradation of society? And yeah, I know, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but when you see things like their other posts, a rare PSA from me, I love my slutty, grimy goblin of a vampire spawn half-elf boyfriend. He calls me lover, holds my hand in cutscenes, and gets upset when I accidentally die in battle. He is the male species perfected, that's all. Like, guys, it is a video game. Can you not experience real-life pleasure, like with another real human being? Your sole purpose is hinging on the sexual exploitation that you find in video games? I'm sorry, that's sad, and I normally wouldn't be freaking out about this, but after years of being attacked and being called some awful things because I just wanted the video game characters in, you know, Western video games or even in Japanese video games to be unaltered, to stop from being censored because American video game companies so often try and self-censor or get on to individuals who want just to have good-looking women in games. Now you guys are dying on the hill of how amazing it is to have actual full-on sex scenes in video games, whereas when I just wanted a character to look hot, I was the bad guy. The absolute hypocrisy is baffling to me. Now, let's be honest, I'm going to be a bit biased here because you all know my feelings on Wizards of the Coast. I mean, I'm a pretty anti-wotc channel in general, given what they've done to Dungeons & Dragons, given what they've done to Magic the Gathering. And in a vacuum, I'm sure that if you've got no experience with this game and have no experience with Dungeons & Dragons, that this sounds like a really awesome game. But this is not. This is part of a larger product. The D&D name has been around for about 50 years now. Magic the Gathering has been around for 30 years. And when you see WotC continuously make these same mistakes over and over and keep catering to a crowd that is so sexually weird, that wants to sexualize literally everything, I can't abide by a company that I used to love giving my money to propping up this sort of, again, degeneracy. I know I sound like such a prude, and I truly don't care about sexual stuff in video games or any sort of art 9 times out of 10. But when it gets to this level, I mean, all things in moderation, guys, and there's been no moderation here. People are giving the most unhinged takes about being able to see, you know, CGI, you know, lines of code dicks in gay romantic relationships, and it's a bit excessive when it's supposed to be a game about, dungeoneering and fighting dragons and living out your roleplay fantasy in a fantasy setting, not in some weird sexualized way. I'm sure there are plenty of other video games out there where you can just roleplay to your sexual heart's content, but that's something that has always been a very small part of Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPGs in general, that they are just blowing up to make seem like the most important thing about this game, when in all reality, this is actually a groundbreaking game on many other levels, but people just want to talk about dicks and non-binary character models. It is exhausting, but those are just my opinions. Let me know yours in the comments down below, or let me know on Twitter where you can find me at BoltTheWord. And please just subscribe. I am a nerdy news channel. I do nerdy news every day, not always about Dungeons and Dragons or Wizards of the Coast, but also about anime, video games, Magic the Gathering, which would be Wizards of the Coast. Either way, it's all here in the nerdosphere, and this has been Words of Paradise.